Chapter 13. The doctor removed the bandage to inspect the dark red scab covering the spot where she had been cut the day before. Silver scratched at the imprint it had left on her arm. He pulled her arm under the shard-lit magnifier they used in examinations. The suit really was intimidating when someone else wore it, and she didn't. Silver's scab hadn't grayed at the edges, and there was no sore or boil forming, but she still felt her skin crawl. Disease wasn't something you could fight or face head-on. It was fear, uncertainty, and anxiety hanging over everyone in the city, and Silver felt it sitting on the paper of the exam table. "Please remove your gown and turn around," the doctor said blandly. She wondered what people heard when she did med checks, and did as she was told. Did she sound callous? Uncaring? Silver promised herself to force more emotion into her voice next time she wore plague gear, and spoke to someone who didn't. She was anxious as he prodded her, thoroughly checking every inch of her skin for signs of sores or disease. It was the only part of the exam made better by the thick rubber of the gloves, not that her examiner showed any interest in doing anything further than his job. "You're clear. Your things are on the table there. We burned your uniform, so we provided an off-duty set of clothing to wear under your plague gear. Get suited up and report back. To Major Barton. Our office has had to answer missives twice a day requesting status updates on your condition. Apparently your absence has been disruptive to the ward crews." "Thank you. I will," Silver said, trying to focus on the eyes behind the goggles. The suit nodded back at her. "You were lucky this time, Greycoat. You should have a better plan for next time. If anyone understands what it means to be infected, it should be someone who worked in triage." Silver nodded and watched him trudge out of the room, the rubber of his suit squeaking as he went. She sighed and reached for her clothes. Bram and Kieran were waiting outside of the plague ward when she exited. She inhaled deeply, relieved to be free of her forced idleness, but was disappointed to taste the metallic tang of air, pulled through shard filters, instead of fresh salt air. "We need to hurry," Bram said. "Barton will be expecting us, and we won't have much time." Silver nodded, already walking downhill toward the bay. "You're right. If we hurry, we can." Bram hooked an arm through hers and spun her back toward the check station out of the quarantine zone. "Bram, we don't have time for this. We need to go interview these kids I saw the other day. I have a hunch about what might be spreading the plague," Silver said, struggling against his iron grip. The man really was big. That was easy to forget when he so often humored whatever obsession had taken her mind in the moment. "We're making time," Bram said, earning a nod from Kieran. "I'm sure you're onto something, you usually are. But you risked your life with that soldier, and you can't follow clues if you're dead or bedridden by infection. Kieran. And I won't watch you put yourself in harm's way, without every tool possible to protect yourself." There was no reason he should have gotten within arm's reach of you. Silver's pulse quickened. Not this again. Not now. One pulse of resonance, and you could have sent him flying. It wouldn't have come down to being a broom handle away from infection. "Bram?" "No, Silver. You and I are going to sit down and talk about feelings. I know you aren't thrilled about this, but we have been working together long enough for you to know that I am usually just as happy to stay the hell out of things. That aren't my business. But, whether or not you know it, we care about you. I care about you. So we are going to try to break through this block you carry. Neither of us are going to enjoy it, but, by the spire, we are going to do it." Silver was dumbstruck by the mountainous force of his insistence. She numbly followed him up the hill. She allowed herself to be processed through the gate and trudged obediently behind Bram until he stopped in the empty yard behind the new quarters Barton had arranged for them. She stared at the flowers in the planter outside the small cottage. She appreciated this perk of their new status in that moment, because she'd rather look at anything than make eye contact with Bram. He laid out 2 mats on the hard-packed dirt, sat down on one of them, and indicated that the other was meant for her. She sat cross-legged, like a child, waiting for her parents to decide on a punishment. "You are a solitary person, Silver," Bram said stoically. "Finding an anchor for resonance skills is naturally going to be more difficult when it isn't something you fear. Some people learn to attune to the emotional state for level 1 resonance skills easily because they come in with coping mechanisms. They built during childhood and refined as they grew into adults. I have seen you perform pseudo-resonance bursts, so I know you have gotten close to the emotional tone that will allow you to channel enough essence to use it as a weapon or a shield. Silva felt anxiety rising as he spoke. She knew all of this. If she could skip to lust or greed, she was sure she would excel in tuning her emotions to resist the influence of those flaws and bend essence to her will. Limbo, though, was a trap. She'd sooner escape being buried in the boggy mud of the moors than teach herself to resist the comfort of the quiet, the absence of expectations that spelled an end to her constant performance. The behavior required to imply connection could be feigned, acted out using scripts and practiced expressions she had learned over the years, but resonance couldn't be faked. She had to draw a shard's essence and channel it through her soul when it was attuned to the frequency expressing the exact opposite of Limbo's pull. That's why they called it the compass. In short, an impossible task for her. Even with the guiding hand of the spire telling her what not to feel, she couldn't find a memory or thought that could generate the sensation of true belonging, and there wasn't a book in Telnira that could teach it to her. She forced her swirling thoughts down as Bram continued. You know the mechanics. You know you're supposed to point your emotional compass at something, a memory or a thought that makes you feel connected. That's the part that you're missing. Kieran had turned toward them and stared at Silva intently. He knew what Bram was going to say. They had spoken about it before. Annoyance kindled in the nape of her neck. Why are they talking about me when I'm not there? Do they think me an invalid because I channel resonance worse than a 2-month novice recruit? Something in his expression kept her quiet, though. Kieran looked sad. In the alley, Trig, well, he wasn't in his right mind, and anyone who has worked triage understands why. Nobility sounds great until you look in the mirror and picture your face half melted from grey rot scarring. But you know what? I would have gladly stepped between you and him. You, Kieran, and I are more than a team. When you sign up for the Aegis, they assign you a division. They assign you a company, then put you in a unit. Us reclaimers? If we get tired of risking ourselves, we just walk away. If we don't want to help, no one tries to press us back into service. We aren't even tied to the paycheck that comes with the blue coat because we usually don't get one. We chose each other. Kieran and I. Bram's voice cracked. We chose you. Silva stared in horror as tears dropped from Bram's eyes and disappeared into the rough stubble of his beard. Why was he saying all of this? Why did it feel like her gut was twisting and doing its best to tangle itself into knots? Even if you don't feel like you belong, you have to know that you do. Even if you tell yourself that you are on your own, you're not. Kieran and I have your back, and we'd both face worse than death to see you safe. Kieran knelt down between her and Bram, not close enough to get inside her personal space, but he completed the small triangle of their little team. A single nod confirmed her suspicion that they had talked about this before, and that the words were his as much as Bram's. The crazy thing is, Bram continued, that we know you do the same for us. You're smart, you're brave, and you care about us too. I want to volunteer to be the memory that anchors your sense of belonging. It may be stupid to ask, but think of us. Think of your team. Think of how we want to protect you. Use that feeling to keep yourself safe, Silva. Don't scare us like that again. With that, Bram and Kieran stood, touched her on the shoulder, and walked away, leaving her to her thoughts. Silva's breathing became ragged and fast. Her team had made the most open expression of emotions that she had ever been party to. This was no schoolyard confession. They didn't want anything from her. They trusted her, loved her even, and all she could think of was the face of the drifter. She heard its claws as it gouged lines in the stone of the chapel, dragging itself toward her. She saw Gentry and Reiner attacking it with all their might, and the lance striking at the core inside the cage of the creature's chest. It was happening all over again. She could feel her voice rise, the rough air as it tore through her throat, screaming for them to duck. Then, finally, the keystone of the failsafe as it slammed home, activating the rune-powered pulse of resonance and burning the drifter to ash. Gentry had looked at her, and she knew what he thought, even if he hadn't said it. If you could have pushed it back with resonance, even for only a moment, we would have taken first. Even with the death of Jaden, they would have been celebrated. As it was, the drifter and its shard were disintegrated in the blast. Jaden's body was torn to shreds and hauled off by the wraiths. All evidence of their heroic stand against the horde summoned by Silver's miscalculation was lost to the maws of Limbo. And it was all her fault. Some part of her knew that if she had taken her hand off that keystone, given up on the option to end it that way, that she could have done what Gentry needed from her. But she didn't trust them. They were on the same team, friends even. But it wasn't enough. There was no mathematical proof of friendship. It couldn't be written as a theorem or tested in a lab. She knew Gentry and Reiner meant her no harm, but something in her heart told her that if it came down to their safety or hers, they would each survive, or not, on their own. Maybe that's why her time in the Aegis ended the way it did. She couldn't know. Bram and Kieran, though. If it were them or her, how would they choose? But she already knew that. She closed her eyes and lifted her hand. The broom handle appeared in her mind's eye, as it took Trig hard in the face. The feeling it gave her was so different than the comfort she felt in Limbo's isolation. She anchored the stupid bristles of that broom in her heart, and pushed her emotional compass in the direction it led her. The massive ceramic planter shattered under a blast of resonance, splattering the wall of their cottage with soil, ceramic shards, and the ruins of the flowers.